Hi, everybody. This is Adam Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology. It's Tuesday, April 23rd today, and I'm doing something new. I'm going to take a look at somebody's birth chart on my YouTube channel. Most of the time, I don't like to look at charts live on the internet because it always invites a lot of people who maybe don't have a lot of experience, who aren't particularly good astrologers, sounding off and saying tons of things. And so I'm always a little bit hesitant to share or read charts online because so, it's kind of, I feel like you need to keep a little bit of a hermetic seal on the work with charts. But I've decided to maybe once, maybe twice a month, pull up a chart, take a look at it, just show you guys some tricks of the trade, so to speak, and hopefully give you guys who are studying astrology some useful tips. So this chart comes from a woman who is concerned about money and finances. So we're just going to do a quick kind of read on what's going on in the chart and what that might mean for this individual and their finances, say, in the year ahead or so. So first of all, we look at the chart and just, if I was going to do a really long, thorough video for you guys, I would talk about analyzing natal karma first, which means you really need to know what's going on in the birth chart first. I'm only going to very briefly mention a couple of things today. A full analysis would take too long. But the first step that I always tell my students is, when assessing transits or what's going to happen, remember that nothing can really happen that's outside the general scope of the natal karma. So you have to get a good feeling for that. So I'll show you one example of that today as we go along here. So first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start, I use the traditional 7 planets at first. And I'm just using them, and then I'll throw in the birth chart, I mean. And then when I'm looking at transits, planets moving in relation to the birth chart, then I'll use the outer planets as well as the traditional planets. But typically when I first look at a chart, I don't plug the outer planets into the natal chart. I'll just use the outer planets for forecasting or transit work, kind of get to know the chart as a Hellenistic at the sort of Hellenistic framework. That's how I try to understand the natal karma before I really dive into transit. So having already done that, here's what I see. Let's start with Pluto, farthest planet out. Pluto and Saturn actually are moving into a space of conjunction, joining together with both Saturn and Jupiter in the 4th house of this chart. So the 4th house is, of course, the roots of your chart. It's your foundation, and it's what props you up in life. In ancient astrology, it's connected to your wealth, to your land or property, to your parents, and to that sense of how much you are capable of propping up your own life, or what kinds of sort of almost like root level chakra issues you might have, just, foundational level support issues in life. And it's very important when you see, someone that's anxious about money and about issues of being supported in life, whether it's you think of it as money or you think of it as just, will I be okay? Am I secure? The 4th house can be an appropriate place to look. This is why also when looking at charts, something else I teach in my classes all the time is that there's not just one way of analyzing what may be happening for someone financially. You can look at the 2nd house, which is the house of money, but you can look, at the 8th house, which is connected to a partner or spouse's wealth. You can look at the 11th house, which is a place of acquisition or gain from allies. Look at the 4th house, which is foundation, property, land, and to a certain extent, wealth maybe that comes from parents or family, or some sense of being able to prop oneself up in life. So again, there's lots of places to look. Well, here's Saturn and Pluto coming through in the next year to conjoin natal Saturn in Capricorn and Jupiter in Capricorn. So just very basic translation, there is a deep contractive Saturn-Pluto-like transformation that is going to appear in this individual's life around that root level place. Typically when this happens, what to speak of the fact that it's a Saturn return, or that Jupiter's in its fall, or that Saturn's in a nighttime chart, or all of these details that you can take into account. But just a quick hit, like a kind of mini reading style, there is a contractive Saturnine sort of moment of reckoning and death with Pluto, and upheaval, and then regeneration coming in the next, say, year to year and a half around root level issues. That can involve parents, sometimes parents dying or passing away. That can involve your land or property selling or buying. Typically, the contractive element will sometimes mean that there are, problems or bills, or that the place that you're living weighs on you somehow, or the need to transform or transition from one support or base to another will manifest. And it's out of necessity with Saturn and Pluto. So it's not easy. It's something that you're forced to do or that you need to do. Something's exhausting you. Keeping up with your property is exhausting. You need to downsize, or there's some sense of having to sell because you're not able to keep up with the mortgage, or whatever the case might be. There's a feeling of it's time. It has to be time, and that's not always easy. But so that's coming in the next year and a half. So you can just, that's in part where our client today, our guest client, so to speak, that's where part of the anxiety is coming from, because she's sensing karmically there is a time of upheaval and transformation at the roots that's coming. So we understand that that's coming, and we just kind of validate that for starters. What else do we see? Well, this might be creating a little bit of pressure in the marriage, because we see that Saturn, transiting Saturn this year for the rest of 2019, is within the range of a close square to Venus in the house of marriage. Now, that can mean that there are that these pressures that we're seeing at the roots are also placing strain or stress on relationships, in particular the spouse, probably. So that could mean that, for example, part of what's creating the necessity to move or relocate or do some sort of downsizing, or the kind of contractive changes coming at the roots on the level of family karma, might be closely tied into the marriage partner. So sometimes you'll see marriage partners' family, their health not doing well, or mom's got to move in, or suddenly you become a caretaker at a nursing home, or spouses dealing with health problems and there's not as much income coming in, or but different kinds of sort of pressures that are specifically coming through the line of marriage. In a general sense, it can also be spouse and I are just freaking out about what to do about property, what to do about where we're living. If there's financial constraints that we're not feeling like, we're feeling like the need to shore up our resources and focus in, tighten up. But there's a feeling of pressure, stress, worry, fear. It's a Saturn Venus. There can be stressors in the marriage too that come up in general, like just we're on the rocks right now. And this, when added into the feeling that the base is changing in your life, that's a lot. It's a lot to deal with, those pressures coming through. Those Saturn, the planet of necessity, the lord of karmic necessity, sort of really putting the pressure on Venus in the house of love. And then, again, Saturn and Pluto just really working through the roots with Saturn and Jupiter down there. Now, one thing natally about Saturn and Jupiter's in its fall. Saturn's well dignified, but in a nighttime chart. This would typically mean that there is some degree of traditional wealth or support, or some nice sense of foundation in life that's available to an individual. However, with Jupiter in its fall, there may be a signature of having to relinquish or let go of, or seeing something that was of a high, noble, traditional, and supportive kind of grounded nature kind of come toppling down a little bit. So Jupiter return for this individual begins toward the end of the year. And then for a whole year, there's also a Jupiter return in the fourth house, Jupiter in its fall in Capricorn. So sometimes the way that will translate will be in terms of there being gain, Jupiter, that comes around your roots, but it has to do with something diminishing, something coming down in size or status, or through some kind of loss there. So overall, I think that this, this period, while it's going to be a little heavy for a while for this individual, it's probably the kind of thing where through some kind of contractive period where there might be some diminishment and loss, and even some upheaval with Pluto, some purging, so to speak. I think that growth is on the horizon, so to speak. But it's the kind of growth that comes through, in the best way, in the best sense, it'll come through some kind of conscious ability to um, reduce what is unnecessary or what is frivolous or what is too much, reduce expenditures, reduce debts, pay things off, pay things down, kind of get simpler. That's the mood that I'm feeling around this particular transit. But again, so that's just kind of, you're kind of mixing together a variety of things at once when you look at transits. So Pluto's like that too. I mean, Pluto's very regenerative, even if it's a little destructive. It clears away what is no longer able to be supportive or able to be supported. So to whatever extent this individual is supporting things in life that are no longer feasible, that's not going to work. To some certain extent, to whatever extent the native is being supported by things that are no longer viable, you may see those things fall apart. So there's some transformation of what is supporting this individual at the roots. And that's going to change, and it's doing so as it's placing pressure on Venus in the marriage house. So this might be something that the individual is really going through together with their spouse, and they did tell me that they're married. So the next piece of this that's worth looking at is the entrance of the planet Uranus into the sign of Taurus. Now, this planet is a game changer. It's a rebel. It's an innovator. Uranus likes to shake everything up. Uranus is a little unexpected, unpredictable, a little erratic, sometimes even sort of violently disruptive. And we're looking at the moon in the 8th house, an exalted moon in the 8th house, which is the house of the spouse or partner's wealth. It's sometimes connected to inheritance or other people's money in a more general sense, but also to financial losses and obligations and debts. So with Uranus, who is this kind of erratic, unpredictable character, moving in to conjoin the moon over the next year as well, and it will be good, well into 2020 that it'll still have good proximity with the moon in its passage in Taurus. You're looking at another signature of some sense of upheaval around what is supporting this individual. But it's not just money. It's potentially the body and health. It's potentially, again, related to spouse's income or, so the moon in the 8th almost always has issues around dependency. What do I depend on? What can I really depend on, or who depends on me? And there's also, the 8th house is traditionally a house of fear and of death and of loss. And so sometimes the exalted moon in Taurus is like, the image of like sitting in a beautiful, lush garden, but just kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop. It's like, okay, well, everything feels good, everything looks good, but I'm perpetually worried about loss. I'm perpetually worried that the other shoe's going to drop, something bad is going to happen. So sometimes Uranus on the moon is when the other shoe actually drops, when there is some, big financial unexpected debt or obligation, or taxes that come through, the rug gets pulled out from underneath you. It can be very disruptive and sort of shocking. The moon does not love Uranus, right? So Uranus coming through the moon in the next year and you see the moon also rules the career house up here. The potential for this individual's career to go through some big upheavals, or for there to be some kind of unexpected disruptive changes related to partners, wealth, that's there right now. So again, what we can kind of see overall is that this person's going through a time of enormous change and transformation around what supports me. And, again, if we could do it really thoroughly, we would talk about the natal karma around these issues, both psychologically and just in terms of fated events. But the good news is that with, Uranus hitting the moon and Pluto and Saturn working through Saturn and Jupiter at the roots, there are root level changes going on in terms of what am I supported by? Where is my foundation? What can I rely on? The potential to experience liberation with Uranus from fear, from anxiety, from forms of support that aren't truly nourishing, and for Pluto and Saturn to consolidate resources, to create a new, simpler foundation, to regenerate this sense of what you stand on, to get rid of faulty structures or faulty foundations and to put something in that's more secure. This is a psychological process. It's an emotional and spiritual process. So I believe in, every time I'm looking at a chart, probably like a lot of you looking at your own charts, if we do these things consciously, if we go and live through these karmic seasons consciously, then yeah, is there going to be some upheaval and some change? And does this individual have, we say native and talking about chart owners in a generic sense in my classes. So does this individual have reason to be worried about upheaval, change, financial turbulence, and turbulence around things like property or home, or even in a wider sense, family karma or parents? Yes, the root system of this chart is about to go through some big changes. But the overall effect of going through these changes consciously is a new system of support, a different system of support. And if we can do these things reflectively, not react, try to control everything, freak out, then really good things can come out of these kinds of experiences. So that's just to give you a sense of how to look at something like that. Let's recap. You always want to analyze the natal karma. You want to then try to get a question. It's always better if you have a question. Someone says, what about money and finances? Then you look at what's being affected in the chart. What are the biggest transits affecting the chart, and which planets are kind of getting affected, the most intensely by these dynamics in the chart. And then from that standpoint, how does this tie into the natives' concerns? What kind of experiences are they about to go through? Is this anxiety that they have? How can we validate or affirm it while also, kind of trying to help a person understand what's likely to come, the benefits that are likely to come out of the experience if we do this consciously. So in my estimation, in our client's chart today, the really great results about this can be moving away from a foundation of fear and where we might have the tendency to cling or be a little too possessive or worried about the future and around what supports us, and moving into a space where there's a deeper level of trust and maybe a simpler but firmer foundation to stand on in life. So, and the timeline, of course, you can be very specific about. I won't in this case, but typically if I was working with a client, we'd get really specific about what particular periods to look at when Uranus is conjoining the moon, or when Saturn and Pluto are literally making their conjunctions and so forth. This is a second Saturn return for this individual, so it's a pretty big rite of passage. It would not be surprising to me if this individual sold the home, if jobs changed, if total financial philosophy or structure of life changed, while simultaneously there were serious changes happening in surrounding family karma. So at any rate, that's what we've got today. So I'm also doing this because I want people, a lot of people have been asking me questions like about my courses. I have a class coming up in June. It's a year-long program where I teach Hellenistic astrology. We do a lot of theoretical study and to break down all of the particular components in the chart. Like, what does it mean that Mars is at the midheaven in this chart and it's fall in a nighttime chart? Or what does it mean that the sun is in the 6th in the sign of Jupiter and Mercury's in its fall with the South Node retrograde? Like, there's so many things about birth charts. To read charts really well, we need to be able to understand the natal karma really intricately. Then we need to know how to track transits, how to know what matters and what doesn't, how to pick up on general themes that can give a person a targeted sense of what to expect around what times. And then, how to be encouraging along the way, how to really help a person go through these experiences with a sense of surrender, but also appropriate optimism. So this is just give you a preview of you know, the kinds of things that we do in my classes too. So my next class comes up in June. It meets on Sunday afternoons. You can participate live or remotely. It's a year-long program. Early bird rate is already in effect. There's payment plans available if you need them. So check that out on my website, www.nightlightastrology.com, and go to the courses page. And you can always email me at nightlightastrology@gmail.com if you have questions about the course. The other thing is, if you thought this was interesting, my summer readings are starting to book up. I'm already booking into June. Eclipse season is coming up. This person, we didn't even talk about the eclipse that's going to fall right on Saturn and Jupiter in that fourth house on July 16th. Another piece of evidence that there's this deep root level change going on. But if you want to check out a reading with me, you can also go to my website, nightlightastrology.com, and go to the readings page. I recommend starting with a basic or comprehensive birth chart reading, and we can work together and get to know your chart and see what's happening for you in the next 6 months or year, see how these eclipses are going to affect you this summer as well. So thanks, everybody. I hope this was interesting. Like I said, I'm going to probably try to do like 1 or maybe 2 of these a month, just different targeted questions that people have, and just showing you the process that I have of looking at questions like the ones that I'm receiving. So thanks, everybody, and I hope you have a great day. It's totally beautiful out here today in Maryland. So I'm going to get out of my office hopefully soon and get out in the sunshine. All right, take care.